Hi, I'm Lee. This is the third and final video in this little series of movie knitting project videos. I knit this sweater, which is now complete, while watching 44 movies from all around the world, all from a different country. So the first video I talked about the pattern and my plans for the sweater and everything and the movies I watched, and I did a tutorial for triple stranding your yarn as you knit, which is how I knit this with sock yarn, with fingering weight yarn held triple. That's like from one ball, so it's triple stranding as you knit without needing to divide your yarn into 3 separate balls, like magic. And the second video, I did the top part of the knitting, talked about the movies I watched while knitting, and I did a tutorial for weaving in your ends while you knit, since I changed yarns with every single movie, which means I changed yarns. Well, it ended up being more than 44 times, so I'll get into that with the sleeves. When I started running out of yarn, I had to change more frequently. So I would have had like well over 100 ends to weave in if I had not weaved in most of the ends as I knit. So I showed you how to do that last time. And now I'm going to talk about the final part, which is the sleeves. And I'm drinking my tea here out of this mug that I got at a thrift store a while ago because it matches so perfectly, right? I realized that when I was getting my coffee this morning, and I was like, hey, the mug matches my sweater. So I thought that was fun. So the sleeves, if you were keeping track, which hopefully no one really was, this video is coming significantly later than I predicted it would. The sleeves took quite a while, so there are a couple reasons for that. One is that I knit them 2 at a time on magic loop attached to the sweater. So the way the construction is bottom up, and then you pick up the stitches for the sleeves and you knit the sleeve directly on. So it's a seamless construction. Which is fine. I prefer that. I prefer picking up stitches rather than seaming later because I'm not great at seaming sleeves, especially set-in sleeves. I actually talked about this in my October horror movie knitting cardigan project video series where I knit a cardigan that's in pieces and seamed, and the set-in sleeves were pretty difficult on that. So I was happy to knit a design that did not have seamed sleeves. I also wanted to do it 2 at a time because the main reason is I wanted it to be symmetrical sleeves. I knew the top part here was going to be asymmetrical colors, and I don't know, I just had a vision in my head for how I wanted the sleeves to have like symmetrical striping with all the different colors, and in order to do that, I had to knit them 2 at a time. So each stripe is one movie across both sleeves. So what that meant is a magic loop, long needle around both sleeves, but attached to the sweater at the same time, which just basically makes the knitting go a lot more slowly because I'm knitting off of 2 ends of yarn also to maximize my yarn and use up each ball of yarn. So I'm knitting off of the 2 different ends of the yarn, triple stranding it as I go, and connected to both sleeves, connected to the sweater. So basically you have to keep everything managed, every row, every time you go around you have to make sure that yarn isn't getting twisted and the sleeves aren't getting twisted and everything is as it should be, and kind of like turn things as you go, and it makes the knitting go more slowly. To me, it's worth it. It's worth it to take a little bit longer to be able to have like the symmetry of like finishing up all the balls of yarn completely, working off the 2 ends until they meet in the middle, having no leftovers. I like that, and it's just like more satisfying for me to like finish both sleeves at the same time and have them both be done. So it's the trade-off though. Like the knitting would have gone faster if I had just done the sleeves 1 at a time. I would have knit around more quickly. And then the other thing is this pattern, which I don't think I've ever seen this before in a sweater pattern. Maybe I haven't, I just forgot. The sleeves are knit at a tighter gauge than the body. I had to like really read through the pattern to make sure I wasn't missing, like to make sure it wasn't that you were supposed to go down at needle size for the pickup and then go back up to the normal size. And I actually went on Ravelry and looked at other people's notes to like make sure that was correct. And some people said they didn't go down a needle size in the sleeves, and their sleeves were way too big and too baggy. So it was definitely intentional. That's how the pattern's written. That's what you're supposed to do. So you go down a needle size, the sleeves end up being a bit more dense, and it fits perfectly. So no regrets, but that also made the knitting go more slowly. And something about the knitting with the triple stranded yarn, had the tighter gauge and the magic loop, like I was just knitting more slowly. Like my act of knitting was just like, I was having to look at my stitches more. It was, the body was like kind of flying by, like that bulky weight, the bulky gauge. It was loose enough with the triple stranded that I wasn't really like accidentally splitting through my yarn or anything. It was like going pretty quickly. And then the sleeves just like slowed me way down. I was having to look more. I was having to pay a bit more attention. So the sleeves ended up taking me 15 movies. I think in the last video I was like, yeah, it'll probably take me like 5 movies for the sleeves. I don't know what I was thinking. So a little bit humbled as a professional knitter. I spent 1 movie seaming the shoulders, sewing the collar onto the back, collar wraps around the back, doing all that sewing, doing a little cleaning up, and then like picking up for the sleeves. So there were 16 movies total. Then the striping is a bit messy. I talked about this last time too, because I was like running out of a lot of the lighter colored yarns from the top. So I like switched colors multiple times per movie in the first couple here. So I used up all the lighter colors, and those were all used up completely and gone. And then I got to the bright green. That was the first one that I had like more of. So that became kind of color 1, 2, 3, 4. And I only had those 4 really. So then it was like 3, 2, 1. And then since I got back to 1, I did that one twice. So I did 2 movies for that. So it'd be a little bit wider before going back into the dark color again. Back into 2, 3, 4. I also somehow flipped the order of the colors from the body to the sleeves in the dark section, which no one is going to know except for me. So it's just, the sleeves just got like messy. I did use up so much yarn though. This is all I have left over. I just have a few little leftovers of those darker colors, and that's it. So did a pretty good job of using up all my yarn, even if it got weird and asymmetrical. And the sleeves ended up being the perfect length too. And I tried on the sweater. I'll show a picture here. When it was first done before I blocked it, the sleeves were a little bit shorter than I would like. The whole sweater was like a little bit tighter than I would like. I thought, I bet it'll grow with blocking, and it totally did. It grew perfectly. And all I did to block it was, because it's superwash sock yarn, I soaked it in like a soak wool wash, and then I squeezed it out and I put it in the dryer for like 20 minutes or something to just like get a lot of the major water out and just make it less heavy with water, since it's superwash yarn. And I did that on delicate in the dryer. And then I just laid it flat, and I stretched it a little bit, but I didn't pin it or anything. I just kind of like laid it flat and just like a little bit stretched, but as it wanted to be, you know? And it turned out exactly the perfect size. The only modification I made to the pattern, again, was I added 1 buttonhole extra worth of length to the body, and the body ended up being like exactly the length I wanted it to be. I definitely recommend the pattern. Again, it's the Empire State Cardigan by Knititude, and I talked about the pattern a lot more in the first video, and I'll link to the pattern in the description. And the only other modification I made really, I think, well, besides the color changes, was I decided, because the cuff is 1x1 rib, I decided to do a tubular bind off on the cuff, which I don't know how well that's going to focus here. I really like a tubular bind off. I like doing it. It's very similar to grafting, which I like doing too. So if you don't mind kind of using a yarn needle and doing a sewn kind of action with your knitting, it's similar to that. And the tubular bind off it has a nice stretch to it. It doesn't pull. It looks really nice on the 1x1 rib. So whenever a pattern has 1x1 rib and a bind off and just says bind off and rib, I always consider like, would this be a better fit to do the tubular, which I like doing. I know some people don't like it, so they have different preferences, but I think it's a good one to just kind of know as an option, because even if the pattern doesn't tell you to do it, you can always choose to do it. I'm gonna give you a tutorial at the end of this for the tubular bind off that I did for 1x1 rib, and you can do that in the round or flat on any project you want. I think it was a good fit for this. I'm glad I did. I think it worked out well. And as with the other tutorials in this little trilogy of videos and tutorials that I'm doing, there's also going to be a drawn illustrated diagram version of the tutorial on my free Patreon. And you can the description link will go to my Patreon, join that for free. You can get the diagram versions of the tutorials for all 3 of the ones that I'm doing during this sweater project that I've talked about. And that I am going to do like a blog post about the whole project with like photos of the finished sweater, and I'll include the diagram tutorials there as well, and probably in a couple weeks. Okay, so let's get into the movies. Like I said, it's 16 movies total for the sleeves. I'm gonna try to go real fast. So I continued with my attempt to watch movies from spread out all over the world. It's hard to fill in some of those countries. Now, obviously, some regions have a lot more of a movie industry than others, but I tried to be pretty spread out. Again, I did a few documentaries this week again that were probably the 2 of the hardest documentaries I've ever watched were during these sleeves, so I won't talk a lot about those. But a lot of variety, a lot of different kinds of movies. So I'm showing my map of the whole sweater challenge. So the first section, which is the body of the sweater, is in red, and the second section, which was the top of the sweater, is in turquoise. And this last section, the sleeves, that I'm about to talk about, are in purple. And then also in the very first video of the series, I talked about, I watched an extra 13 movies for the March Around the World movie challenge that I wasn't able to knit the sweater while watching. So those were another 13 different countries that I watched as kind of part of the movie side of this challenge. So this map has the gold, those extra 13 movies in gold. So these are all 57 movies from everyone from a different country that I watched in 2 months, just in March and April, not even all the way to the end of April. So I think that's a pretty good assortment of countries and movies. And then there's several more movies that I have kind of on my watch list that I didn't even get to from different countries that weren't got to during this time. So I think by the end of the year, I hope to have the map filled into like probably 70 countries, so I'm at 57 right now, so I have the whole rest of the year. I can get to a bunch more countries by then. I think it's fun. If you want to see all the countries I've watched movies from, and all these with my ratings, reviews, I have tags. I tag each one with where I watched it, what streaming service I watched it on, or physical media or theater or whatever. That kind of stuff, and some of them have reviews written. I link to my letterbox and my letterbox list for this challenge in the description, so you can go check that out. Oh, also just another reminder that I've talked about before, I highly recommend the app/website Just Watch to see where things are streaming. I'm not going to tell you where everything is streaming or where I watched it, because that might change by the time you're watching it, or depending on your region. Some of these I watched on Mubi with a VPN, so I just say I was from a different country. So the best way to see where things are streaming where you are is the Just Watch app. And this section of movies, these 16 movies, were actually all from either Criterion Channel or Mubi, which I subscribe to, or Canopy or Hoopla, which are free with my library card. And those 4 were every movie on the sleeves, except for one, which I own on DVD. That was the only exception. So if you like these kind of movies I'm talking about, and a lot of the kind of movies that I talked about in my Best of 2024 list too, Criterion and Mubi are great ones to subscribe to, and you've got to be on Canopy and or Hoopla, whatever your library uses. There's hundreds of amazing movies on both of those, totally free, no ads. Very important. When you hear free streaming, you assume ads, right? But if it's free with your library card, your library is providing you these movies with no ads, which is amazing. And use your library. There are lots of good reasons to use your public library right now. The more it's used, the more it will stay funded, and having your library card and using Canopy and Hoopla, also Libby for audiobooks and ebooks, is a great way to support your local public library, which doesn't even require any money, just getting free stuff. So as my little soapbox, use your lever, use canopy, use hoopla. They're amazing. I love them so much. I use them constantly. The first movie I watched while doing some of the seaming and sewing, which I need to like look at more, so I couldn't really do subtitles. So I chose Strictly Ballroom from Australia, which is 1992, Baz Luhrmann's first movie. So Baz Luhrmann, a few years after this, did Romeo plus Juliet, which of course I was obsessed with at the time and I love it. And then Moulin Rouge a few years later, which I was really obsessed with in college. I loved Moulin Rouge. It was like my favorite movie. So I think I might have actually seen Strictly Ballroom at that time in college, but I had zero memory of it. Like it wasn't familiar at all. So I don't know, it counts as a first time watch. It was really fun. It was less wild and big than Baz Luhrmann came to be later in his career. I wanted it to be wilder and bigger, and it was like, it started out like that, and then it just like toned way down. It was just like a normal movie, and then I was like, oh, it should be bigger. That's my take on it. It was fine. Then I watched a movie from Nigeria from 2023 called Mami Wata. And this was like a very art house movie, black and white, beautiful, high contrast cinematography. The whole thing was this really, really high contrast black and white, and it took place in a coastal village, so there was a lot of like reflections on the water. It was gorgeous to look at. It was like based on folklore of the region, and it had like a plot, but it also had a lot of stuff like I didn't quite understand because I didn't know like the folklore and stuff, but it still like it was good. I liked it, and it was beautiful. Then I watched the first documentary of this batch, 20 Days of Mariupol from Ukraine, 2023. This, I believe it won the Oscar for Best Documentary. I definitely heard of it when it was new, heard of it at the Oscar times, had it in my watch list for years, 2 years now. I knew it was going to be like hard to watch, so I kept putting off, and it was extremely, extremely hard to watch. Really difficult, really important, but difficult. Next I watched Chungking Express from Hong Kong, 1994. This is by Wong Kar-wai. It's the second Wong Kar-wai film that I've seen. I didn't love it. I can understand that it was like very influential, like it continues to be influential on like independent film, like moving forward. It's like a very like Manic Pixie Dream Girl character vibe, and I had like sensory irritation by the same 3 songs just playing over and over and over. Like every scene has a song, but it's the same 3 songs, and it was just like kind of driving me crazy. I didn't enjoy it very much, but a lot of people love it. A lot of people, 5-star movie, so check it out for yourself. Then I watched Revenge, not to be confused with the Coralie Farjah Revenge horror movie from a couple years ago, which I saw a couple years ago and it was great. This is very, very different. Revenge from USSR, 1989. It was the very end of the USSR existing. So I watched it to count for Russia. The movie is in Russian, the Russian language. It was made in the USSR, but I did some studying after I watched it, and I found out that it's actually made by a Kazakh filmmaker as part of the Kazakh New Wave movement. So like most of the actors were from Kazakhstan, and so I would have actually counted it as Kazakhstan, but I already watched a movie from Kazakhstan last week in the last section I talked about, and it was the worst movie. I hated it. So in hindsight, I would have watched this instead of that and counted it for Kazakhstan, but because I didn't know, I'm counting it for Russia like on the map, but it's USSR. It was interesting. I don't know. I don't have much to say about the movie itself. It was weird. It was kind of hard to understand, but I did some research after and learned more about it, and I learned that it has to do with like Korean people who were displaced in Kazakhstan and their experience, and so it's all very like kind of symbolic, and I don't know. It was okay. Then I watched Mami from Canada from 2014. I had some issues with this movie. This movie kind of sort of says that like a abusive behavior and racism can be excused away by ADHD, which I think is very problematic. Don't love that kind of perspective on neurodiversity. Like, no, it's not okay to be racist. Just because you're neurodivergent, you can't just be a terrible person. And have the movie be like okay with that. I don't know, maybe there's other analysis on the movie that like completely disagrees with my take on it, but I didn't love it. I did like the thing it's most famous for, like if you read about it and read Letterboxd reviews, the thing it's most famous for is like playing with aspect ratio, as like an extremely pushed in aspect ratio of like an exact square. So like it makes it look like it's almost like portrait because it's like a perfect square, which you never normally see. And then there's like a point in the movie where it actually expands and then compresses again. And like that, a lot of people didn't like because they thought it was like gimmicky, but I thought it was really cool. I liked that. I liked the aspect ratio stuff. I didn't like the characters or the story. Oh, also I should say it was French Canadian, so I think it takes place in Montreal. I'm not sure. Quebec City? I'm not sure where it takes place. I don't remember. But it is all in French. So I like to do a French Canadian as like the around the world challenge if possible, because then you're getting more other languages. It fits the whole world theme more, I think. Next I did a really fun one. This is like one of my favorites of this batch because it's so weird. It's called The Lure from Poland from 2015. And is a Polish reimagining of the original The Little Mermaid story as a horror musical. So it's still a musical. It's very different from the Disney musical. Its own original songs in Polish. Kind of like rock and other kind of genres. Definitely horror, although like a lot, like the horror just kind of comes in a few times. And definitely like the story of Little Mermaid, like has the sad ending of the original non-Disney version. Not to spoil it, it has some variation on the sad ending. Super wacky. I liked it. I thought it was fun. Oh, mood change. Okay, then I watched the opposite of a fun movie. I watched the other extremely intense documentary of this batch called The Act of Killing from Indonesia 2012. So this movie's from 2012. I remember hearing about it when it was new at the time, and I listened to film podcasts, I still do, but the film podcast that I listened to the most talked about this documentary quite a bit, and it was like one of their top movies of the year. And I think it was nominated for an Oscar. So I always meant to watch it, and I kept putting it off and putting it off and putting it off because I knew what it was about. And what it's about is the mass killings in Indonesia in the 60s. I think the 60s. I'll put it on the screen if I'm wrong. And so basically it was what some people call a politicide. It's not a genocide because it was based on political views, not ethnicity, although there were some ethnicity elements to it. But basically they tried to kill all the communists, but they could say anyone was a communist. They could call you a communist and kill you. Anyway, that's what it's about. It's about those killings and how they just killed whoever they wanted to. How they did it. When I say how, I mean actually how. Like how they killed them. Like in detail. Starring the guys who did it. The killers are the stars of the documentary. It is like, however hard to watch you think that sounds like, you're correct. Like, it's definitely not something I ever want to see again. I'm gonna warn you, I watched it on Canopy. I watched it and it was like 2 hours and 45 minutes long. And then I went to log in on Letterboxd, and on Letterboxd it said it's 2 hours. So there's two versions of it. There must be like a director's cut or something. And so the version I watched was significantly longer than like the official version, and I was kind of upset because I would have much preferred to watch a cut down 2 hour version of that if I had the choice. if it sounds like something you want to watch, I would recommend. I mean, obviously it's important to watch people kind of rationalizing horrible acts because people continue to act horribly now. And I think it's important to see how, like, there's people, they're not demons. Like, people who commit these atrocities are humans. So humans can be influenced into thinking horrible acts are right or good or the right thing to do. Obviously that's very applicable to today. So I think it is important. I think everyone should see it, but probably try to seek out the 2-hour version instead of the almost 3-hour version that I watched, because I'm guessing those extra however many 45 minutes weren't necessary, right? If they're not included in the normal version, I would assume I just kind of suffered for an extra 45 minutes for no reason. Probably, maybe, I don't know, maybe not. And maybe Letterboxd is wrong. Maybe there's only one version, I don't know. So that was hard. That's a very hard one. Next I think I watched this the same night immediately after, and I wanted like a comedy. I wanted something as light as possible. So I watched Another Round because it was listed as a comedy. It's from Denmark from 2020. And it's a very like indie European comedy. Like, it's not like hilarious. I didn't laugh out loud much. But it was fine. I liked it fine. I kind of just like forgot about it immediately after watching it, you know? It's one of those, I was like, yeah, okay. All right, let's try to go faster now. Okay, I think this is the last documentary. Yeah, it is. Okay, the final documentary I watched was Araya from Venezuela from 1959. And it takes place on the Araya Peninsula on the north coast of Venezuela. And it's about this community who collects salt for generations, for hundreds of years. And the filmmaker says it's not a documentary, but rather a poetic narrative. And so it's, I mean, I think it's a documentary, but it's basically showing the people, like showing footage in like beautiful black and white cinematography of this community and people like living their lives with like poetic narration over the whole thing and like music. It was interesting. It was like nice, pretty. Then I watched Red Island from Madagascar from 2023. This movie took place on a French military base in Madagascar. And it was really interesting. I liked this one. I think it didn't get like super great reviews. It was just from last year, and I just like didn't really hear anyone talk about it. But I liked it. I learned a lot about Madagascar too by watching it and also like reading Wikipedia. So I said I'm gonna go fast, but it's hard. It takes place from 1970 to 1972 on a French military base, and it's all from the perspective of like this little like 8, 9, 10-year-old kid, French white kid, who is just like observing everything around him and listening in on conversations between adults, and just kind of you're seeing what this world was like through his perspective. And it's based on the filmmaker, on his childhood, you know, loosely fictionalized kind of. So it's basically all white French people, mostly, except for like interactions, except for the very end. The film just kind of switches and flips over to be like from the perspective of the Malagasy people, and like their perspective, and what it's about in the end is this exact time period it takes place from 70 to 72 was during this kind of period of unrest, because the Malagasy people had won their freedom from France in 1960, but then the government and like schools and like everything of power was kind of all still ruled by French people, like from 1960 on, so they were technically independent, but like schools were still teaching in French, and like the only people who were allowed to like become doctors and stuff were like white French people. So in 1970 there started being some unrest with like farmer communities and like student communities and stuff, and we're just like seeing a little bit of this, like from the perspective of this kid who doesn't really know what's going on, and we're just like seeing little hints and like hearing little hints in conversation. And then at the end, it ends in 1972 when they won, and they won their independence. I mean, they had already won their independence, but they hadn't actually been allowed to rule themselves, and so they kind of disrupted the structure of the French government and stuff, and got their freedom. And it kind of like ends with like showing a glimpse of that, which is interesting at the end. So it's another movie that I learned a lot about through also like studying a bit after. Then I watched The Idol from Palestine from 2015, and it takes place in 2005 and 2012. It's like a jumps in time, in Gaza specifically. So you're getting to see Gaza in 2005 and then again in 2012, and you do see like a lot of destruction that has happened between those years. There's a little bit of hints at bombings happening and stuff in 2005, but then when we go forward to 2012, there's a lot of rubble, a lot of buildings have been destroyed by that time. Obviously, this is still long before 2023, which I'm assuming most people know that this has been happening long before 2023, but the movie really, opens up your eyes to like, hey, this has been going on for quite a while. It's cool to see communities of people, kids, like, living their lives, and their lives are not easy, and there's disruption and stuff, but the movie isn't even about, the movie's about a kid who is in a band and sings, and then it goes forward to 2012 when he's an adult, and he ends up being on the kind of Middle Eastern version of American Idol. Pretty sure it's called Arab Idol, and this is a true story. So he's like the first person ever from Gaza to be on the show, and in order to travel from Gaza to be on the show, he has to basically risk never being allowed to return. And it was really hard to get out. In the first place, he has to like forge paperwork and stuff to get out, and then he's told like you probably can't come back. So it's a really big deal. Obviously, he's the first Gazan, or Palestinian. I don't think he's the first Palestinian, but he's the first person from Gaza to ever be on the show, for a reason, because of how difficult it is for him to be on it. And he wins, and it's a spoiler, but it's a true story. So it's the story of him, of everything he went through, and then winning. And it's like really happy for Palestinians to see someone from Gaza winning that big show. And I was never an American Idol watcher or anything, but I liked the movie a lot. I thought, it wasn't like a masterpiece of filmmaking. It was just kind of a somewhat light kind of biopic, but obviously like dealt with some heavy subjects because of what it's about, and that it can't avoid that. But it's basically just like a feel-good story of this guy who wins the singing show, and it's like happy, but has depth to it. So I'd recommend that one. That's actually the one that I own on DVD because I bought it in a sale, and I bought it without having seen it. So that one might be a little bit harder to stream, but I think it is available for digital rental for like $3 or $4. So if you wanted to see it, you could rent it pretty cheap and watch it. And then the next one I watched was called Only the River Flows from China from 2023. This is like a new release on Criterion Channel. It's like a neo-noir. It's not my favorite kind of movie. I was kind of tired when I was watching it too. It's one of those movies I just kind of like watched and then immediately forgot because it didn't really stick with me. It's just not the type of movie that I really like. Detective thing. Then I watched a pretty fun one called Leonor Will Never Die from the Philippines from 2022. And this one, as I was watching it, I was like, it's kind of like, not exactly, but it's kind of like a mashup of that movie Thelma from last year and A Last Action Hero. That's what I had in my head while watching it. So it's about this older woman who was a movie screenwriter, like when she was younger, and like still dabbles in like screenwriting, specifically action movies. And she ends up like in a coma, and then in her brain she's like in her own movie that she's writing, which is an action movie. So she's like that's the last action hero part of it, you know. She's like in her own action movie. It was pretty fun. It was like a little bit like scrappy, messy, like I wasn't exactly following everything, but it was like a fun, enjoyable time. And then I watched a weird one from the Netherlands called Borgman from 2013. This one I saw people comparing to 3 different filmmakers / movies, and I would agree it's kind of a mashup of these 3. So it's a mashup of like Yorgos Lanthimos, specifically like older, like Dogtooth, like very weird, like not like the favorite, but like weird Yorgos Lanthimos, and Parasite and Funny Games by Michael Haneke. It's kind of like those 3. Like if you took those 3, if you took like Dogtooth, Funny Games, and Parasite and mashed them together and then made it from the Netherlands, like you get Borgman. So if you like those 3 things, check it out. Right, and then the last one that I finished off the cuffs and did the first bind off and finished the sweater was my #1 favorite of the whole sleeve section. So ended out on a high note. It's called Poetry from South Korea from 2010. And this had been on my radar for quite a while. I heard about it when it first came out because one of the podcasts I listened to really liked it a lot, and it was kind of, oh yeah, I should check that out at some point. But it kind of just like sounded boring. So if you read the description, if you read the plot synopsis and it sounds boring, like don't worry. It's not boring. So it's by a filmmaker named Lee Chang-dong, who did a movie called Burning in 2018. And I just saw Burning like maybe a year-ish ago. And Burning was another one that like really stuck with me. Like, I didn't even think I loved it when I first watched it, but I kept thinking about it later, and I kept wanting to read people talking about it and stuff to be like, what? I don't even understand what it meant. Like, I needed to, like, hear other people talk about it. It just, like, really stuck with me. I ended up buying it on DVD, and so I was like, I should watch this filmmaker's other movies. So, Poetry I loved. I think I like Poetry more than Burning. So I won't get in too much to the plot, because basically, like, the very basic plot synopsis is this aging woman starts taking poetry classes and wants to learn how to write poetry. But there's, like, a lot to it. Her and her story and her mental health and stuff like that. And then she is raising her grandson, and there's, like, some really intense stuff that happens with the grandson that she's like dealing with at the same time that she's dealing with her own stuff and like wanting to write poetry, and it all is intersecting with each other. Yeah, it's definitely a movie I like wanted to think about and hear people talk about after I watched it, same as Burning. Yeah, so ended on a high note. That one was great. I definitely recommend that. And that's the end of the sweater. So now I think I talked about those movies for way too long. I always say I'm gonna be quick, and then I like have too much to say. Sorry, but not sorry, because if you're watching this, hopefully you wanted to hear me talk about the movies, right? Hopefully that's part of why you watched the video, because you were interested in the movies, and I talked about the movies. So now I'm going to do the tutorial, the Tubular Bind Off tutorial. And again, because the cuff was 1x1 rib, I decided to do it. So this tutorial will work for any 1x1 rib. So whether the 1x1 rib is in the round or flat or a sweater or socks or heavy gauge or loose light gauge or whatever, you can use this technique, and I really like it. And again, check out my free Patreon or blog in the future. If you're seeing this video after a couple weeks, you can find it on the blog, but the description will have links to everything for a illustrated diagram version of the tutorial as a single image that you can just download and have on your phone or computer and just like check out whenever you want to do the tutorial. And this video is time stamped, so you can skip straight ahead to the tutorial if you come back to it later. Here we go. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to do the tubular bind off, and this is what it ends up looking like. It's nice and stretchy. It's this is unblocked, so it'll be like a little bit flatter and nicer once it's blocked, but it's a real nice edge. It kind of makes it look like the ribbing goes like around. Like it's like an invisible bind off kind of. And the way it's done is very similar to grafting. If you're familiar with grafting, you're kind of like grafting the ribbing together, kind of. It's like the motions are kind of like the same, but it's just with one row of ribbing instead of 2 rows. So this is my cuff edge to be bound off, and I'm at the beginning of the round where I would start a new round. So I cut the yarn about 3 times as long as the round. So I kind of measured like around once and then times 3. That's approximately how much you want. It's similar to grafting, so it's like the same kind of deal where you're cutting a long length. 3 to 4 times just to be super safe, but it shouldn't really be more than 3 times as long. And I have a blunt, big fat yarn needle because I'm doing a bulky weight. You want a blunt tip if possible. You want to avoid a really sharp tip because then you'll be likely to kind of go through your yarn. So a blunt tip is best for the needle. And you start by going through the first stitch knitwise, as if to knit, like this. And you're going to drop off that first stitch and pull the yarn through like that. And for every time you pull it all the way through, you want to kind of pull it like taut, but not like really tight. You don't want to pull really, really tight because then you'll have a too tight bind off. You just want to, again, same as grafting if you're used to grafting, where you're kind of like pulling it all the way through, but you're not like yanking it super hard. And then the next step is to go through the second stitch over. So not the stitch closest, but the second one, purlwise, like this. So you're going through the second one purlwise and pulling that all the way through. And then the third step is you go through the first one purlwise and drop it. So again, purlwise and drop it and pull that through. And then the fourth step, that was 1, 2, 3, and now we're on 4. The fourth one is the only one that's a little bit tricky. The fourth one, you want to go through the second one knitwise, but you don't want to overlap over the first one and make like an extra loop. You need to go knitwise through the back. So the way you do that is you put your needle through between the 2 stitches, in between the 2 stitches, and then while you're still getting used to it, what you can do is go all the way through and then go through knitwise. Back through to the back. Okay, so you're going through the stitch knitwise, but then you're going through to the back. So it's knitwise, it's just this other one is here in the way. So see that? Knitwise through the stitch and then back through to the back. Now once you kind of get the hang of what you're doing, you can do it a little bit more in like one motion instead of 2 separate motions, and I'll show you that as we keep going. I'll pull that through. So that was step 1, 2, 3, 4. That was the 4 steps. Now the way I like to do it when you're actually doing it and kind of getting the hang of it is do them in kind of groups of 2. So you do a drop step and then a second stitch in step and then a drop, second stitch in, kind of as pairs of steps. And whatever the first stitch on the needle is, that's what you're going to start with for your pair. The first stitch is a knit, so you're going to start with knit, drop, and then second stitch in purl. And then when the first stitch is a purl, you're going to start with purl, drop, and the second stitch in is a knit. So you'll be switching back and forth. So the first pair of steps is the first stitch drop and then the second stitch after it's dropped, which means they're both knit. So the first pair is like the knit and the knit, and the drop is the knit, and then the second stitch is the purl. It might not make any sense right now until you do it, but it's just the way I like to think about it as I'm doing it. That way, if you put your knitting down and pick it back up and you don't know where you are, you can always look at the first stitch and know where you are. The first stitch is a knit. You knit, drop, and then the second stitch in you purl. So this is what I mean by doing it as a pair. Instead of dropping and then pulling the yarn all the way through, I do it as a pair where I knit, drop, and then purl the second one right away, and then pull it through. So that's what I mean when I say do it like a pair of steps at a time. You're doing 1, 2, pull all the way through. So that was your first pair. Now the next one is the purl, which, you know, the first one is the purl, and because it's ribbing, it's kind of hidden, so you can always look at the second one as a knit. If you see the second one's the knit column, then you know the first one's the purl. So when it's the purl, you purl drop, and then you do that weird knit from the back, which I'll show you now doing it all in one motion. You go in from the back, in between the 2 stitches, and you grab that stitch knitwise, so in the back it looks like this. Focus. Okay, so you have it grabbed from the back, but you went between in order to grab it. It's really hard to see. You kind of just have to do it. So I'll do it again. So my needle is still through that one that I dropped because I'm doing it as a set of 2. So I'm going through between the 2, and then I'm grabbing that stitch knitwise, and I have it grabbed in the back there, and then I'm pulling it through, pulling the yarn all the way through now, because that was the 1, 2 pair of steps. So that was 1, 2, 3, 4 together. So again, knitwise, so it goes knit, purl, pull through, and then the next pair starts purlwise, so it's purl, and then the weird knit, which goes like that. Pull through. The more you do it, the easier it gets. All right, then we'll do again. The first one is knit, knit, drop, purl the second one, and then the first one's purl, so I purl, drop, knit the second one. This time I'll go all the way through again. While you're still getting the hang of it, you can bring the needle through the 2 stitches all the way through to the front, and then from the front, just go through that stitch purlwise, which makes your needle go through to the back. And then I'm pulling it out the back. So knitwise, knit, drop, purl the second, pull. First stitch is purl, so I go purlwise, drop, knit the second, which means go through and then back through knitwise, and pull. And you just keep doing that all the way around. Again, to be clear, this is for a 1x1 rib. This happens to be in the round. If it was flat, it would be the same, as long as the first one starts with a knit. So the way I showed you, the first one was a knit. If you're doing it and the first one's a purl, then you would need to start with the purl, and that would be the same if it was flat. And because I'm going in the round, I'm just going to keep doing this all the way around until I get to the end. And at the end, both stitches will be dropped. And then when I'm weaving in the end, I can kind of weave in through that like first drop stitch, because right now it's like it didn't get all the steps in it, you know? So when I'm weaving in, I can kind of go through that first stitch as part of the weaving in process to like clean up that edge where the 2 ends join together. and it'll be a nice clean edge. You can see it starting to form. And this is great for cuffs like I'm doing now, for neck bands, bottom hems, and also for socks because it's nice and stretchy. If you're doing it for something like socks where you need it to be really, really stretchy, then like don't pull quite as hard, like leave it a little bit loose on purpose. And if it looks a little messy because you're leaving it loose on purpose, like once it blocks out and you're actually wearing it, it'll be fine. Just because it's like, it's very stretchy right now, but it's not like the most stretchy ever. So you can make it stretchier by doing it looser. That's the Tubular Bind Off. Right, thank you for watching through to the end of the video. I hope you got something out of the tutorial. I hope it's helpful and you try out that technique if you've never tried it before. I hope the tutorial helped you to try it for the first time and get the hang of it and get used to the motion of it, and then you can see once you do it, you know, once you go through those steps a few times, it gets faster and easier and you get a rhythm to it. So check out my free Patreon with the tutorials and other fun things. There's other movie related things, knitting related things. There will be in the future more other knitting related things and more zines. I have a best movies, my favorite movies of 2024 zine available for free on the free Patreon right now. And I'm planning some other zines, including maybe some like food cooking kind of zines. And maybe I'll do some food cooking videos too. I'm not really sure though. So that brings me to like, I'm still figuring out what I'm doing with YouTube and with Patreon. It's all like pretty new, figuring out what works and what doesn't and what I want to do. So if you have something you want me to do, whether it's related to knitting or movies or cooking or anything else, if you follow me on Instagram, you see other things I'm into, I guess. If there's something you want, just be like, hey, you should do this. And maybe I'll do it. Maybe I won't. I'm just trying to figure out like what would be fun, what I would enjoy doing, and other people would like get something out of. So what I'm hoping you're getting out of this series is that it's awesome to like knit and watch movies at the same time. And I really have fun combining my knitting project with my movies in a way that's like, the project makes me think about the movies, like they're like really tied. You know, this sweater will always make me think of movies from around the world and how I watched a different movie from a different country for every single stripe, and like I'll always have that memory attached to it, which is just like a personal thing just for me, but I like it and it kind of makes the knitting more meaningful. I just think movies and knitting are like a perfect combination of activities, you know? So I'm hoping that this video series kind of like makes you think more about movies and knitting, and maybe, you know, watching more movies instead of TV sometimes. I think TV has there's a lot of good TV too, so you can do both. And you can totally do TV knitting projects too, you know? You can do knitting projects to TV shows the same as I do with movies. But movies are really good. I just really love movies, and I hope that I inspired you to maybe watch some movies that are outside of your normal movie box. You know, if you mostly stick to Netflix and Hulu and Disney, maybe check out those free library card, Canopy and Hoopla, because you'll get a lot of different kinds of things that you're not seeing on those. Also, something I love about Canopy and Hoopla, also Criterion and Mubi, they don't push things at you like Netflix, and I think Netflix is kind of like the worst in terms of like pushing things at you that they want you to see, and just making it really hard to like browse. You're just kind of like seeing the same things all the time that they're like raising up to the top, and it's hard to like look deeper. And then also they do like the autoplay stuff, and also like when the credits start rolling, they'll do like ads for other things like over the credits, or like autoplay the next thing. All this stuff that's like to just get you sucked into just like watching what they want you to watch, or choosing quickly and not taking your time. I don't know, just the experience is like, basically when I'm at my parents' house is the only time that I'm like browsing Netflix, and I just like kind of hate the whole experience of it because I'm used to these other kinds of streamers. And if you check out, again, Canopy and Hoopla, totally free, no commitment, all you need is a library card. just start browsing. Like, especially Canopy is a much better interface. Hoopla's interface is a little bit weird because Hoopla also has like music and ebooks and stuff too, not just movies, and it's like kind of messy, at least on my TV. Canopy has a really nice interface that has a ton of different like categories and subcategories, and there's like, you know, a category for like Oscar nominees and a category for like documentaries and tons of different like specific categories. So whatever you're into, whatever you're curious about, you just want to browse and see. There's tons of movies that you would have heard of. They're not all like really obscure international movies. Tons of Criterion movies, tons of like Oscar-y, you know, former Oscar winners type stuff. Spend some time browsing and check them out and watch them and get like a much nicer, more pleasant experience that doesn't feel like things are being pushed at you. And also, like, you'll get recommendations based, like if you watch a movie on Canopy, they'll recommend other movies that are actually similar to the one you just watched, that aren't just like, watch this new, you know, $300 million budget movie we just made that has terrible reviews. Instead, it's like, oh, watch this like super obscure movie you've probably never heard of that's like similar to the one you just watched. So if you like that one, you might like this one. It's cool. I like those things, those streamers. I hope you check them out. I just went on a long ass ramble, but you're probably not watching anymore because it's the end of the video. So if you're still here, thank you for being here, and let me know what other kinds of videos you want me to make. Thanks, bye!